Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
I am your host, Emmanuel Roche. Thank you very much for listening today. Every other week, I interview chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders to discover their secrets behind the scenes. I want to know what compelled them to become a chef or a bartender. I want to learn everything about their creative process and discover the unknown ingredients that are finding their way in their drinks and dishes. Today is episode number 10. And as usual, you can find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. Click on the episode page. I have a special guest today. He's not a chef, but he works with them. He's not a bartender, but he has sommelier in his title. His name is Philippe Wolf. He is a cannabis sommelier, and he is the owner of Cultivating Spirits in Colorado, where recreational cannabis is legal. So today we are going to talk a lot about cannabis, and especially its pairing with food. Hey, hi, Phil. Good to have you on Flavors Unknown today. How are you?
I'm doing really good, Emmanuel. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you.
Good, that's what I like to hear.
I'm excited to have you on the show today because you are a special guest, obviously. You know, so far I've been talking with chefs and bartenders. So you are a certified cannabis sommelier. You smoke, you eat and you drink. What does that mean to be a certified cannabis sommelier?
Yeah, so, essentially it's about educating the people on cannabis, but also serving it at the same time. So as a wine sommelier, as a cicerone, would be able to educate you and serve you, beer or wine. It's that same thought process. We do cannabis pairing dinners, and that's what I specialize in. So I do a lot of cannabis and food pairings is what I mainly use my certifications for, and my, a lot of self-developed theories that we've come up with over the years.
So would you say a little bit that cannabis is almost like wine? Because, if in wine, you are talking about soil, you're talking about the sun, the terroir, the aroma. You can have an aroma that could be earthy and mushroomy. And I'm guessing that's, for some of the string, you can have something similar. So do you think this is a little bit between cannabis and wine, a little bit the same story?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. You have different varietals of cannabis, in the sense of different types of strains. And there's a lot of things that make up that strain that make it identifiable from a different one or a different varietal. And then it also does matter how much, how the cannabis is grown, whether it's grown under the sun, whether it's grown under indoor light, the type of soil, or even the type of growing medium it is in general, because you have hydroponics, aeroponic soil, obviously, and then the curing process, and who is putting their hands on it affects, the terroir, the overall, the touching of the plant and the soil throughout its whole process from seed to harvest and cultivated into a wine. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities in that sort of sense, but at the same time, they're completely different. Although we can treat them the same way, it's not necessarily, we're not dealing with the same thing.
So how did you get into pairing cannabis and food? So how did you get into, that business and creating your company called Cultivating Spirits back in 2014?
I started cultivating spirits after I went to a wine experience outside of Barcelona at the end of 2013, right before recreational industry was being put in place in Colorado. And we, some businesses that I was working on prior to that had to do with tourism. And my background comes from cultivation and opening up dispensaries, so I know the plant very well. We went out there and I thought of this is what we need to introduce to mainstream America to allow them to grow an appreciation for a different way to experience cannabis. And I just started exploring the ideas of cannabis and food pairings And at first I thought it might be a play on words. And ultimately I figured out there's kind of a science to it once I started learning about terpenes. And so what a cannabis and food pairing is where we pair terpene profiles of cannabis with flavor profiles of food to harmonize and enhance. And so that's kind of the goal within it.
So let's not go too quickly into terpenes because it's a very important aspect of obviously our talk today. But can you describe a little bit what are the different components, from cannabis? So terpenes, obviously, but you have all the others. So can you describe a little bit all of them?
There's 3 different types of compounds within cannabis that give you the feeling that you get when you consume. There's your cannabinoids, which is CBD, CBN, CBA, and those affect different nervous systems around your body, the endocannabinoid system. And so that's what provides a lot of healing properties of cannabis. And then there's also THC, which people are familiar with, and it gives you kind of the psychoactive feeling that cannabis will give you, that high feeling, if you will. And then there's flavonoids, which is a little bit lesser known compound of cannabis. And then there's your terpenes, which terpenes produce the aromas, not only of cannabis, but all fruits and vegetables, flowers, plants. And within the natural world, they attract pollinators and predators and detract predators. And then they also, as they produce aromas, they also produce these oils that help fight diseases from the plant. And when consumed by humans within cannabis and with the entourage effect it has with the other compounds of cannabis, then that's what gives you the type of mood that you're going to feel. Whether it's you feeling energetic, whether you feel creative, whether you feel focused, sedative, that's kind of determined on the terpene profile of cannabis.
And then obviously the different strains of cannabis have different level of terpenes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a different terpene makeup that each of the different phenotypes of strains have. So there's 212 or so terpenes that exist within cannabis. There's a really predominant 16 of them. And so there'll be different percentages of like 2% myrcene, 1% pinene, and there is different levels of them. And so you can really, break those down in different layers of smell ultimately when consumed, and that you can identify, and you can identify what those smells are associated with. So therefore you can kind of identify your high, if you will. But that really takes a trained nose to be able to identify the different levels of terpenes within cannabis.
Sativa, for instance, flowers would have certain type of taste because of the terpene that it contains. So they could have like maybe some citrusy profile, and some other, can have maybe more like coffee or nutty flavors. And then this is the way how you approach it when you are putting together the pairing between, the strains of cannabis and food.
Yeah, that's exactly how we're approaching it. We're breaking down the citrus smells into it, the citrus flavors, the tropical notes. There's grounding notes within it, spices, black pepper, cinnamon, clove, and there's obviously fruity smells to cannabis, and there can also be, herbal smells to it as well, pine and juniper and, lemongrass and stuff. So we break those down, and then, the cannabis sommelier will pass that over to the chef, and then the chef will try to mimic those in the flavors. And so the idea is to smoke and then enhance that flavor as you're eating. So opposed to wine, where a lot of times you're trying to cut the flavor, with cannabis, we're really trying to enhance the flavors and match them.
For instance, I would say like if I take the super lemon haze, for instance, that probably have some like citrusy notes and so on. So will you pair that with maybe fish or with yogurt or, that type of things?
Yeah. So that will, typically what we consider as high sativas and citrus strains, I don't really believe in sativa indica. It's more about terpene profiles, making the feeling what it is. And there's so many strains over the years that have been manipulated in the black market where they're just really not what they once were. But that's a whole nother story. But, if you want a general rule of thumb, it is your citrus, your kind of pine flavors, which is alpha pinene, limonene, that will go with, white fish, with chicken, duck, those types of proteins. And then your heavy indicas, which have a lot of like myrcene in them, linalool, caryophyllene, those are going to be spicier grounding taste to it, your coffee taste to it, your parsley, soil, kind of moss type of taste to it. And that's going to go better with deeper red meats, kind of the earthier it is. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb that you can put. But I think when the culinary industry can be so creative, I really think chefs are thinking outside of the box with things that they can do to, make these flavors make themselves.
What's your favorite pairing yourself?
It all depends on the night, ultimately, with what you feel like eating. But we've had some, recently we had a comfit dog leg with some plantain gnocchi, English blue cream, and daikon sprouts. And that was with lemon wheel, which is similar to the super lemon haze that you were speaking of earlier. So that was one that really stood out to me, by Chef Edwin Sandoval out of Denver, Colorado. Recently, we also had this braised short rib with herb polenta and a chili negro sauce, and with ghost plain haze, and a very spicy dish, but a very spicy strain. The mouthfeel on the end of that would just leave your mouth kind of buzzy and kind of allow you to be a little thirsty. So it's kind of mouth quenching. That was a really good pairing that they did. Although typically I'm not a huge braised short rib guy. So it all depends on, really appreciating the art of pairing the cannabis, because you can think of it in so many different ways, because you do have the mouthfeel aspects of it. There is such a variety of flavors that people can play with. And it really gives you layers. There's layers of terpenes, as we were discussing, as there's different levels of them. And so it really gives people the ability to layer food.
So how would you describe your creative process when you work, with your colleagues, and how do you start? What's the starting points, and, how do you apply your creative process?
I love that question. Ultimately, for the way that cultivating spirits works is, it all starts with the cannabis sommelier breaking down the strain. Then we move to the chef. Cannabis Som will contact the farm and will identify strains that will be harvested about, 3 weeks prior. That's about how much time it needs to go through a proper curing process and be at a good moisture level to serve. And then from there, we'll go through and think about the journey that we want to instill into people with the effect of the strains that they'll give you. So typically you want to start off being energizing and then working into some groundings, more sedative strains as you get through dessert. But you can take that journey wherever you want to go. And then you'll start going through your 5 senses of the cannabis. You'll start identifying physical attributes by just studying the cannabis, looking at the crystals. That's where all of the compounds exist that give you the effects, is within the crystals of cannabis, and then the trichomes. And then from there, you'll, break into it and start, feeling the density aspects of it, how sticky it is, again, by breaking it open and using your touch. And then you'll release the terpenes from the cannabis as they get bruised, and you'll start identifying those smells in them, which we know how a lot of smells are associated to taste. And then from there, we'll go through a tasting. And so we'll, smoke. I identify the taste on the inhalation, how it feels on my throat, because that can allow you to understand, how well it was possibly cured. Then I will do a slow exhale, notice the taste on the exhalation, because typically they're different than on the inhalation. And then you will smack your tongue to the roof of your mouth to start getting your saliva moved around, and that will give you more of an overall feel of the taste. And you'll also identify how thick the smoke is, what the mouth feel is afterwards, where the buzzing's coming in your mouth or on your tongue, how long the lingering aftertaste is and what that is. So there's a lot of other components that you take in, as you're doing tasting, and then you're just writing down your opinions of the strains and, the tasting profiles that you get. And then we'll pass those, and we try to be very dynamic with understanding that there's layers of flavor going on and trying to be and communicate that as well as possible to the chef. And then, at that point, it's the chef's creativity to be able to design a menu that harmonizes well with the tasting description that you give them.
You will have probably some things that are almost, I would say, standard because this is a type of strain and then the type of terpenes in there. So there is pre-established, I would say, combination with food based on all the multiple tasting that you have done. But as you were saying that you get the plant, like it's fresh, it says, about like 3 weeks. Do you have as well, obviously, variations because you work with a natural product? Even with the same strain, are you going to have like different profile because the plant is different and then you will have to adjust? So the menu will be changed?
Yeah, so I think if you're working with, strains from, same strain names, but they're from a different farm, then typically it's a different phenotype of the strain and they're not going to be the same. So it is important to really go through a tasting every time because like you said, it is a natural product and there's also a different handling process with different farms. And terpenes, while the plants are growing, they change terpene profiles depending on the maturity of the plant. So even if you harvest at a different date, the plant, and all plants are individual, so it's not like every strain needs to be harvested the same day. You really got to take the plant as an individual. But, that matureness of the plant, depending on when you harvest it, can change the terpene profile. We will always try to be aware of that. And when we're working with similar strains, but they're grown from different places, it's whenever we design a menu and, depending on how far in advance we design the menu, if we're not able to go through a proper tasting and we kind of use it on past history, but then acquire the strain and notice these different elements that we weren't expecting, then, we have tweaked menus before in the past to reflect that.
You are offering 3 different cannabis pairing dinners. Can you describe, what's the difference between the 3 and then what's the experience that your guests are going through?
Yeah, so we're actually about to incorporate a few more packages into our offerings so we can service, just couples instead of always feeling like we have to do groups because right now everything's designed around small group dinners. We're also going to offer some higher end packages as well. But essentially what you can expect is, for our small group dinners is it's really good for a celebratory evening. So bachelor, bachelorette, birthday parties, friends, gatherings for a unique experience, but also an educational, but bonding. And those are our 3-course cannabis pairing dinners. And you can expect a cannabis sommelier, chef, serving staff coming in with the cannabis table setting. We treat cannabis like the 3rd layer to the dining experience. So there's a lot of tools that go along with that to make it flow. And then we design a special menu just for you and your group. And we come in and teach you kind of the basis of cannabis pairings. And we'll go in through some deeper connoisseurship aspects of cannabis and, while making it a special evening for your, the people who you're bonding with. And then soon we're about to just do it like a chef's table. So it'll just meant for couples or 4 people. And that will be where just a chef will come in and produce cannabis pairing dinner for you and give you some education, not to the full extent that a cannabis sommelier would, but it still allows you to have this type of experience, with some loved ones. And then we kind of have our corporate packages that are available. And, those will be bigger 5-course, 6-course dinners for 50 plus people or doing kind of hors d'oeuvre pairing hours or for, 100 plus people. And so that's doing past hors d'oeuvres with cannabis pairing. So there'll be cannabis bars and little plates of cannabis being served out or joints served out with hors d'oeuvres. So those are the main offerings that Cultivating Spirits provides.
What is the profile of your customers?
Typically, our customers are, kind of an executive class from the Midwest, East Coast, and Deep South. It's a lot of people who don't have cannabis provided, or legalized in where they're at. And so they want these types of experiences. So they'll come to a place like Colorado or Las Vegas to experience cannabis, and we offer a really safe place for those people. So yeah, that's who we primarily market to and get as our client base. But ultimately, cannabis is made for everybody, all walks of life. So I feel like this is an experience that anybody would enjoy.
And do you have a different approach with people that would be their first time, that never had an experience of cannabis before?
We are very aware of people's cannabis consumption when they come sit down at this, and we always do our talks within the component of start very small or don't even consume at all, because we want you to pay attention to your body, and that's what we think is most important. And so we come from the base of no to very light consumption, and then you can always work yourself up from there. Unless we're very well communicated that we're very experienced, we'll always approach it for the person at the table who consumes the least amount and making sure that person's comfortable, and then we can work up from that. So I don't know if I do a lot of snowboarding, and if you're doing backcountry snowboarding, you're only as fast as the slowest person that you're with, because you have to be very safe with how you go about the mountain, and so, while you're waiting for everyone, you're all there as a team. And it's kind of that same sort of concept at the dinner table. But saying that, it's really special seeing a lot of people who say they're not going to consume, because typically there's one person or two people at all the dinners that don't want to consume with the clientele that we get, but they want to be there with their friends and they can still enjoy the same food, as everything we do is through smoking. A lot of times they ended up taking like one hit of cannabis because they feel like they're in safe space. They become educated on the effects of it. They understand there's more of a mindfulness to it than they expected, and typically they try it, and it's wonderful. That's my favorite part about this industry, is when you see those light switches click, and people, and seeing how you can use cannabis in a different way than you typically are used to seeing in the past.
So how can I become a cannabis connoisseur?
Well, first you should start off with a cultivating spirits dinner, and to get the overall concepts.
So I have to come to Colorado. Yes.
Yep. Colorado or Las Vegas to do that. I mean, we'll fly to other legal states, but it's a lot more expensive at that point. So I recommend you coming to us. And then, we are working on putting together an educational system, like certification system, for how we see that, with the knowledge that I've developed over the past 5 years and developing our theories, and, making an educational platform that everyone can go to learn how, not only the science behind cannabis, but how to serve cannabis and how to experience cannabis. So I would definitely recommend to, sign up for email lists and take a look out for that. There's also a company called Trichome Institute, in which they do interpening certifications, which I think has a little bit more of a science focus to it, opposed to like a service industry focus to it. But it's definitely a great platform to look into it if you want to become more educated on cannabis. There's a certification program called High Class Education that kind of talks about just kind of service, if you want to think about kind of like a tips card or something like that. There are more educational companies launching, which is great to see, because it's so important right now, and in this industry, which still has so much growth ahead of it.
And are you yourself still finding like unique and surprising terpenes that you can create new stuff with your chef, and things that are making maybe their way to your menus?
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm really appreciating sun-grown cannabis a lot more now. It's a lot cleaner of a way of production of cannabis. The terpene profiles are actually a little bit lighter, but you feel more of a cleanliness from it. You feel a lot clearer when consuming it. And it actually makes it a little bit more tougher, because you don't have quite the enhancements as you do in other strains. And I don't want to say that in a negative way. I think it's in a cleaner way personally. And so there is, I think, deepening my knowledge, really testing my nose more to understand, to identify smells in sun-grown cannabis. I mean, and you do smell a lot more of the soils and the minerals in sun-grown cannabis, and you recognize a lot more with the dirt than you do indoor cannabis. So that's what I'm really having fun with right now, honestly, is exploring that, and, doing dishes that incorporate with more of a a healthier diet.
So thank you, Philip, to be on the show. I have now, to end up and to wrap up, I have 5 rapid questions for you. Okay?
Okay.
What is the one thing that annoys you the most when people talk about cannabis?
I think it's the word marijuana and the identification of cannabis being something that is unmindful and lazy.
Okay.
The term marijuana was just kind of a made up word from certain industries in the early 1900s and publications. And it essentially was a derogatory term used towards migrant workers who were coming to the United States and working, and they were smoking this marijuana, breaking the law essentially when consuming. And so that's how they played it. They really used it as a threatening term. So that's why that word really bugs me.
And you have seen that I haven't heard use that word in the whole show.
You've been good. You've been good. I love it. I appreciate it. And so much of it people don't know, so it doesn't necessarily annoy me, but it's like I wish people were just more aware of that term.
What other things people do wrong when they smoke cannabis?
Light the whole entire bowl and really burn. It's wasteful, putting too much flame to too much flour.
What's your most memorable cannabis food pairing moment?
It was probably an entire dinner that we did in Aspen for the opening night of X Games that we actually got approved by the municipality, which was the first cannabis dining experience that was approved by the municipality to operate within its city limits. And we did it in downtown Aspen. It was an amazing event, 56 people, 5 course, 5 wine, 5 cannabis pairing dinner. And, it really, I think, raised the level and awareness behind these types of experiences.
And if you weren't a cannabis sommelier, what would you be?
I don't know, maybe a cannabis cultivator like I was before this, or, probably a world traveler somewhere.
Yeah? Where have you been? I mean, I know that you have been in a lot of different countries, but...
Australia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. I do a lot of nonprofit work down in Haiti, Peru, Colombia, throughout the Caribbean and a couple of places in Europe. I got a decent amount of traveling in me, but, to go, I also teach yoga. So to be able to go and, teach and live around the world. I mean, that's, who wouldn't want to do that for a period of their life?
So what are your nonprofit work?
Myself and a few other Americans and one Haitian started a health clinic down in Southeast Haiti. So we started about 5 years ago. The health clinic's been open for almost 3 years. And that stemmed from opening, I started some health and leadership camps in the Dominican Republic. So that's where Haiti stems from. But I don't necessarily have a health background, but I kind of just saw this opportunity and, people in need and, a real opportunity to help them. And kind of the cannabis industry really provoked me to want to help because I was making a good amount of money cultivating at the time and saw a lot of people who were and felt like I could really raise the money to do so to get this started for Hispaniola Health Partners, our organization name. Once I started getting into it, I realized that it was a lot more than just raising money to get this clinic started. It was really about creating community organizations to support it and make it feel like it's the communities and not just some handout. And people would support it a lot more and want to utilize it a lot more because a lot of them have never really had westernized medicine or, centers that are down the street from their house that they can actually utilize. It's tricky in that sense, but so glad I got to experience that because you learn a lot.
Do you still go there?
Yeah, I haven't been there as often as I used to go there because we have such a developed board now and we have such a great staff in Haiti where it's kind of honestly beyond my abilities because we have doctors and lawyers and, business minds that, covering our finances and, and our doctors and nurses and some people who help us within the organization down in Haiti. So I don't go there as much, but I'm still the vice president and, still do a lot of advising for the board of directors and, at things that are going on and with the operations down in Haiti.
Very cool. I really was pleased to have you, on the show. And it was, we have seen each other. It's been, I think, 2 years now. So it's great that you had some time and I was able to have you on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out to me, Emmanuel, and hopefully I see you. Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening today. No worries if you were not able to write down some information that our guest was talking about, because you can find all of those in the episode show note on flavorsunknown.com. And if you are enjoying the show, please leave a review or a rating, as it helps other people to find it as well. If you have friends that are foodies, please send this podcast their way, as I am always happy to have more people listening. I see you in 2 weeks, and until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
You've just enjoyed another delicious episode of Flavors Unknown. Hungry for more? Hit subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from by leaving a review. And for social media and show notes, head to flavorsunknown.com.